The president talks about this as our great heritage, and they want to vandalize our heritage. How would you answer that in the context of what he's talking about here is the Confederate flag or Confederate monuments?
Well, the statements that he makes, statements like that are just divisive. It's unfortunate that he doesn't realize that we are all Americans. We all need to live together and coexist peacefully. And what we are doing as far as the Black community is concerned is making it very clear that we are unhappy with and tired of being put in the back seat, effectively. And we require and we insist on our equal rights, equal justice, lack of racial profiling, police brutality. We're tired of it. And so the Black Lives Matter movement is something that speaks to that. It speaks to equality, stop the discrimination, stop all these things that try to demean us and put us down. We are equal and should be treated equal as Americans. And for the president to make some of the statements that he makes that further incense people is not productive. I don't understand what his method is or what he's trying to accomplish, but all it does is incense people. I was hoped that he would be a president that would stand for and promote unity, but that clearly is not the case.
Bill Lester, really grateful for your thoughts and insights today. This heinous news incident will be investigated, but more broadly, I very much appreciate your insights and perspective at this very important moment. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
And thank you, sir. Take care.
Wherever you live, certain truths are universal.
If you don't, Charles. I mean, this has, I think, displayed the challenges that we have in some of our government systems right now, right? Which is that we need more data to make informed decisions.
Behind this all is a pathway to reduce inequality. And a very important element that the finance institutions can push is access to finance, equal opportunity in access to finance. Look, every single day, 400,000 children are born on this planet, every single day. When they're born, it's lottery. Race, gender, geography, your family's wealth. It doesn't have to be lottery all the way through. We can make it so that every child can reach its full potential. And it is a matter of determined policy choice that we ought to make.
Kristalina Georgieva, head of the IMF, managing director, thank you so much for joining us. And our next guest joins the ranks of Martin Luther King and Congressman John Lewis in devoting his life to fighting poverty and racial injustice. Reverend William Barber is co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, which this weekend had its own march on Washington, calling for economic justice. Only this one, the 2020 version, was virtual, with more than 2 million people taking part, according to the organizers. Reverend Barber is joining me now from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome back to the program, Reverend. I said, in the introduction that this seems to be a moment on the street and in the pandemics that is a moment to seize this day. Do you believe, and you just heard to the IMF chief, do you believe that institutions that can are serious about making this matter right now in your issue?
Well, this is a moment, but it's been a moment that's been coming because of the confluence of movements that have been building. For instance, this weekend, we now say we had 2.5 million people on Facebook, and we can track that metrically, and over 300,000 people that sent our platform to governors and all of the members of Congress. This was the centering into our national consciousness, a movement made up of all races and faiths and creeds and sexuality, vowing to say, listen, we have to address 5 interlocking injustices. Systemic racism and all of its components, how it impacts First Nation people, how it impacts brown people and black people, systemic poverty, 140 million people, 43% of this nation, ecological devastation that's undermining the clean air, clean water, clean land, and then the war economy, where we're putting 54 cents of every discretionary dollar into war, and that is more money than we put into education, infrastructure, healthcare combined. and then we have to address this false moral narrative of religious nationalism. And when 2.5 million people say we can't go to D.C., we were planning to be there, but we're going to be online, we're going to sign up, and we're going to join. That is critical. It says something that we're in a reconstruction moment. We're not in a moment for just tinkering around the edges. We're not in a moment for people just trying to say they like people, but they don't change policies. This is a transformational moment.
Well, to that point, you've written earlier this month, there's one answer to why the wealthiest nation in the world cannot provide for its most vulnerable. We have decided not to. And so you are, again, calling for this structural end to this structural poverty. Do you think, despite the streets and the 2.5 million who joined your virtual march, that there's the political will where it's needed to actually make this shift? Because it is a shift in distribution of resources.
It will have to be where we not only be in the streets, but we're going to have to be in the voting booths. And that's why we're also building power. We're in a moment where the people are going to have to change the political atmosphere. Just like people that went across the Edmonds-Pettus Bridge, none of the politicians wanted to deal with voting rights. The president didn't want to deal with it, but the people forced a change in the political context, and that wasn't even in an election year. We have a greater possibility because we're in the middle of an election year. Now, it doesn't mean go vote in November and then leave and go home. It means that we have to build power, and we have to show people what we did on Saturday. It wasn't people talking about the poor. We've got thousands of texts back that said, we saw ourselves. We said, look, America, you must see yourself. These 5 interlocking injustices are affecting a white farmer couple in Kansas, just like it's affecting coal miners in Kentucky, just like it's affecting fast workers in North Carolina and people down in the Delta of Mississippi. And the more we show that to the people, the possibility of change. Now, the politicians are going to have to understand what this moment is. They're still playing with it. They don't understand yet this is the moment, and they better. Because if we can't fix these issues in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of the poverty that's coming, that's going to be added, another 15,000 people in unemployment, if we can't face these issues of raising living wages and getting health care and dealing with poverty, God help us as a country. This is the moment. This is the moment that we must build this movement. And what we're saying is we're not going anywhere. We're going to be at the voting booth. Whoever wins, we're going to be still in their face. We're going to keep pushing, because what other choice do we have? As one guy said on Saturday, our backs are against the wall. We have no other choice but to fight. And then lastly, we've got to decide in this country, do we believe in our first declaration, and that is life? Because every regressive policy, denial of health care, denial of living wages, even denial of voting rights, has what I call a death measurement. People die when we don't have health care. People die when they don't have living wages. People die when we have voter suppression, and people use voter suppression to get in office. And then once they get in office, they protect corporate polluters, and they deny health care, and they block living wages. If we're going to deal with the death of George Floyd, as we should, we're going to have to deal with the deaths that we don't see on camera, but happen every day, to the tune of 700 poor people dying every day from poverty. We have to deal with the death measurement. Otherwise, we don't mean what we say when we say we offer life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
So what happens then when you have a situation of voter suppression and all the other issues that you're all working against, Stacey?
What did he just say? What did this man just get through saying? Listen to this one more time.
Care. People die when they don't have living wages. People die when we have voter suppression, and people use voter suppression to get in office. And then once they get in office, they protect corporate polluters, and they deny health care, and they block living wages. If we're going to deal with the death of George Floyd, as we should, we're going to have to deal with the deaths that we don't see on camera, but happen every day, to the tune of 700 poor people dying every day from poverty. We have to deal with the death measurement. Otherwise, we don't mean what we say when we say we offer life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
So what happens then when you have a situation of voter suppression and all the other issues that you're all working against, Stacey Abrams?
In other words, whenever we say in our Constitution that you have the right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the Constitution is a lie. If we're going to pick and choose towards who's got the right to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You cannot destabilize one race above and beyond another race whenever you say life, liberty for all. Not part of all, but all. That don't matter if you're a red man, yellow man, black man, or white man. All. A-L-L. All. That's just like Jesus said, whosoever shall calleth upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. That reflects to all. A-L-L. And the thing about it is, in our teachings in the Bible, those that claim to be Christians, the Bible is very clear towards stating that if you cannot love him who you can see, regardless of what their color may be, if you can't love him or her who you can see, regardless of how much money that they may have, or how much education that they may have, or what part of the city that they was raised up on, or whether or not they're driving a nice vehicle or they don't even have a vehicle, whether or not they come from Australia, Russia, Canada, China, Mexico, South America, Greenland. If you can't love whom you can see, how can you expect to have the true agape love in your heart of loving the Heavenly Father who you can't see? All this hogwash, I'm going to call it hogwash, of all this bickering and fighting and all this racial inequality is just exactly that. It's a bunch of hogwash. And it doesn't matter if you're in China and you think because you've been successful in your career that now you're above and beyond everybody else, or you're living down in the Philippines somewhere. It's a bunch of hogwash if we cannot get along and treat one another as equal. Now, there's no doubt certain people have certain higher positions pertaining to either being in the political field or even in the religious field. And I'm even going to throw the medical field in there. There's various departments pertaining to agriculture that stands above and beyond, let's say, making cars. And the reason why I say that, it's not that I'm saying that making cars is not important, but we must first have food, nutrition to live off of. And if the farmer fails, then we all fail. So whenever you look at that perspective, yes, I put agriculture pertaining to tractors, combines, farmers, ranchers, people that work on the farm, people that work down in the groves, the orange groves, the potato markets, other types of agriculture communities. I put them above cars to that extent. It's not to say that cars aren't important, because they are, but you can't plow a field with a car. You can't plant a field with a car. You can't harvest a field with an automobile. Okay? So there are certain positions that hold various levels of more importance than they do others. And of course, those things evolve. Those things change over a certain period of years. You know, at first, whenever we discovered coal, and coal was a primary source of energy pertaining to our steamboats and our steam engines on our trains, and how that we manufactured various things in our factories. Coal was a major asset in what we done and how we done it. Well, we have evolved since then, and we know now that we can engineer the same amount of heat, if not more, by using a different form of energy. So we have evolved over coal. So now coal is not number one like it was back in the early 1900s. We have evolved from that. or we're supposed to have evolved from that, pertaining to putting one item above the other. As far as I'm concerned, agriculture will always be number one. You can't evolve from not having nutrition and living. The combines, the tractors, the hay balers, the people feeding the cows, the people feeding the chickens, the people cultivating the corn, getting potatoes out of the ground, digging up sweet potatoes, Irish potatoes, peas, beans, tomatoes, radishes, all the above. As far as I'm concerned, those will always be number one, because you can't deviate from being able to survive on nutrition unless we can evolve, kind of like in the space industry, with only eating little bitty strips of meat and maybe surviving off of little bitty pills pertaining to energy pills or something. And that's always a possibility, that we could always evolve as a nation in doing that. We haven't done it yet. We're still packing in potatoes and beans and corn and eating hamburgers and hot dogs. You know what I'm saying? Pizza and stuff like that. We haven't evolved to that level yet. So as of right now, those strips of artificial inseminating nutrition bars and pills and stuff like that hasn't hit the front burner yet. So agriculture is still on the front burner. So there's different positions for different people that hold a little more interest than they do others. But by and large, looking at the people, looking at who we are as a whole, as a society, as a mass, the masses, we are supposed to be equal. It doesn't matter what country you're from or what country you're living in. We're supposed to be equal. And there's no doubt the black man has been treated unfairly and unjustly because of the white European man. But so was the red man. And so has other cultures throughout society, not just here in America, but throughout the planet, that has been treated unfairly because they didn't have the right this, or didn't have the right that, or didn't look this way, or didn't look that way, which is all based around discrimination. Discrimination is wrong. Discrimination is wrong in that sense.
Is working against, obviously, we saw what happened in the primary in Georgia, and now we hear, obviously you know these figures better than I do, the ACLU says 1 in every 13 black Americans cannot vote due to disenfranchisement laws. Are you convinced that everybody who wants to vote in your community, you said that's the first step, will be able to in November and throughout the primary season?
Well, when I talk about my community, I'm talking about poor and low wealth people, regardless of what their colors are. Yeah. Because we've done a study we'll release in just a moment that shows if you just register 15% of poor and low wealth people and they vote, they can fundamentally change the political calculus in every state, and they can overwhelm the system. So what we say, we fight against the voter suppression in the courts. We will fight and have poll watchers, but we must overwhelm the system. 100 million people stayed home last time. In the 3 states that Trump won, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, by 101,000 votes, 2 million plus poor and low wealth people that could vote didn't vote. And so what we're saying is it's time to put all of that power on the table. Now, to do that, we need politicians to stop just talking about the neoliberalism and the middle class and start talking about the poor and say how their plan, their policies on banking, their policies on wages, their policies on healthcare will help everybody, will lift up everybody. They need to say, this is how it will help the black community. This is how it will help the white community. This is how it will help rural Kentucky. This is how it will help those in Kansas. This is how it will help those in the Delta, so that people hear their name and hear their condition. A lot of folk have stayed home in these past elections because the politicians only talk about the middle class and the wealthy. Poor and low wealth people expanding the voting numbers are the key to fundamental transformation in this country. And it's time, past time, that we talk to them. We're saying that to the candidates. I certainly hope those running against Trump will do that. If they do it, they will see a mass turnout of voters like never before. But then again, we're also saying even if they don't do it, we're going to build power, go to the polls, and make it so that the poor and low wealth in this country can no longer be ignored. This is a movement time. We have to have a third reconstruction, and we have to have it now because too many people in power are too comfortable with other people's deaths and desperation.
And you do represent the poor. The disproportionate amount are, according to all the statistics, Black Americans, minorities, and we understand that there's obviously going to be this primary in Kentucky tomorrow, and in Jefferson County, home to nearly 800,000 people, apparently will just have one polling station open, and 1 in 5 residents there is African American. You know, everything starts with voting, I guess, and filling out the census. How are you going to be able to convince people to get over those hurdles?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, disproportionately 61% of African Americans are poor and low wealth, but 66 million white people are poor and low wealth, which is 40 million more than the 26 million Black people. Now, having said that, we worked in Kentucky for 2 years before this last governor was elected, and we worked in 5 counties, and 3 of them changed from Trump counties to voting for this new governor. And the governor won when Black folk from rural eastern North Carolina hooked up with Black people from Louisville and found that together they needed to take on the extremism in their state. We say to the people who are, let's fight in court, let's do everything, but tomorrow, you gotta stay in that line. You gotta do what you have to do if you don't have but one because people died for it. And then we gotta fight between now and the fall to open up those more districts. We've got to sue in court, get emergency decisions to make sure that there are more precincts and that people have access to the ballot through mailing. But what we have to do is be determined. We cannot let these people who want to steal this election and undermine this democracy win. And I say to folk in my community particularly that if our people face down dogs, and if they face down lynch mobs, then surely we can face down those who simply want to keep us from the poll. This really is a moment that you have to decide. These matters are a matter of life and death in our communities. They're a matter of life and death of this democracy. So we have to fight in the courts, move in the streets, and we have to move at the ballot box, and we have to stay there. We got to do whatever we need to do nonviolently to register our votes because they wouldn't be fighting so hard to keep us from voting if they could win a fair election. And poor and low-wealth Black, white, brown, First Nation people have the power to change this election, and we have to do it.
Have you ever stopped and asked yourself a question? If this country didn't go through all this suppression towards trying to colonize the red man at first, which basically turned into nothing more than an act of desecration towards trying to eradicate the very existence of the red man, the same way that the Jew was almost desecrated from the planet, pertaining to the risation of Hitler, of Nazism. But have you ever asked your simple question that what if all this bickering and fighting pertaining to this racial profiling would have been dispersed, let's say 100 years ago? 100 years ago, to where everybody was working equally and fairly with each other towards building a productive society. How far advanced would the American people be right now, in, above, and beyond where they are in any other part of the world? You know, America used to be number one. We used to be number one in agriculture. We used to be number one in medical. We used to be number one with our science. We used to be number one in the medical field. We used to be number one in creativity. We used to be number one pertaining to advanced this and advanced that. We used to be number one in all these areas. And now we're taking second seat, and in some places even third and fourth seat, to some of these other advanced countries that are moving up the chain to the point of them becoming predominantly productive in these type of resources that they are providing for humanity. So you have to ask the question, is it worth all this bickering and fighting and arguing over fair racial tensions like we're seeing right now? Because it's basically strangleholding our productiveness towards productivity in the future towards where we should be. I mean, we don't even have enough money right now to fix our roads and our bridges. And we're still in the streets fighting one another. We're still arguing over the same damn thing. When is this going to stop? When is this sickness, this madness, this corruptfulness that the white European man brought over here to America, when are people going to wake up to this destruction in identifying that this is a disease and it needs to be trampled upon the same way as you would trample upon tuberculosis or diabetes or Lou Gehrig's disease or polio or cancer or AIDS? It's a damn disease. And this disease needs to be trampled out of this racial profiling. Because all it's doing is dragging us down as a society. It's hurting us, not helping us. Whenever England decided that they was going to come over here to America and colonize the red man, that looks good on the front end. It does. It looks real good on the front end. But whenever they come over here and started genociding. It's one thing to colonize, and it's another thing to genocide. And that's exactly what they was doing. They was genociding the same way as the pharaohs wanted to genocide everybody from around them to where nobody prospered and gained and was in control other than the pharaohs. And God brought the pharaohs down. Just like God is going to bring this type of evil, demonic, cruel, insensitive, European, prejudice, discriminating ways, he's going to bring that down too through this movement. And we as a society, regardless whether you want to call us a Christian society or a non-Christian society, we as a society will eventually get over this. It may take more pain. It may take more opening people's eyes. But all this hate mongering is going to have to stop, because the Bible is very, very real in how it describes humanity and how that we're supposed to interact with each other, because it says to let the wheat grow with the tares until time of harvest. God has not yet come back in the second coming towards rapturing out his church from this planet. So we as a society are going to have to learn to incorporate our differences in different ways, and we're going to have to give people a chance after making a mistake, or because of the color of their skin, or because they don't have proper education. We're going to have to learn to reconcile our differences, because the chain is only as strong as the weakest link, and if all you have is weak links, you do not have a strong chain. You have a very, very weak chain. A weak society. A society right now that is a sick society. And I'm just not talking about sick as far as the pandemic of the COVID-19, the coronavirus sick. I'm talking about a sick society towards being obese, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, tuberculosis, sexual transmitted diseases. I could go on and on and on, aborting all these babies and doing all these things that are ungodly. We have a very, very sick society right now. One culture against another culture, having all these culture wars. And it's not just over here in America, it's over there in the Middle East. You know, it hadn't been too long ago to where the Arab upspring over in the Middle East basically threatened America in 1993 by saying we was going to go to war with the American people, and eventually we was going to be able to eradicate or dominate that society the same way that they have plans of dominating the children over in Israel. This is evil. It's demonic. It's wrong for a group of people to say, well, we're going to turn you into our converts one way or the other, and if we can't turn you into our converts, we're just going to kill you. We're just going to cut your head off. And if we get killed in trying to kill you, then we're going to go to heaven and drink all the wine and live with 99 virgins. That is the most craziest ideal that anybody in their freaking right mind could ever freaking think of towards it being godly or righteous. That's the very thing that the Bible teaches against, which is violence. The very thing that the Bible teaches against. Turn thy cheek, offer thy other, love thy enemy, feed the poor. People know what the Bible teaches. Clothe the naked. Help those who need help. Disperse your proceeds equally and help people into a productive society. This is all right now, all this conflict and all this controversy and all these uprisings and attacking one group versus attacking another group is all the work of Satan. It's all the work of a demonic force that is at play towards trying to bring humanity down a little bit lower, that the Bible teaches that the primary suspect, the core of origin that is out doing this, is called Satan, which is out to kill, steal, and destroy because he is the author of confusion. And if people can't recognize that, it's simply because they don't want to recognize that. If people can't acknowledge that, it's simply because they don't want to acknowledge that. If people can't accept that, it's simply because people don't want to accept that. There's only two entities in the world: the entity of good and the entity of bad. You're either going to do the right thing or you're going to do the wrong thing. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution to the problem. You're either looking at the glass towards it being half full or you're looking at the glass towards it being half empty. I'm tired after 30-something years of preaching to a bunch of people that is turned a deafened ear to the things that I have to say. I'm tired. Just like Jesus was tired whenever he went up onto the mountain and said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I have gathered thee together as a hen would gather her chicks, but ye would not listen. For the past 30 years, the people locally around in this area would not listen. Even Thomas and Tommy Moore, Judge Tommy Moore, and other high-positioned people that hold high-ranking positions or very wealthy farmers or business people in this area would not listen. And you wonder how come we are where we are today, towards disarray, towards chaos, towards anarchy. Once more, the Windmill Ministries has not failed the people. The people has failed the ministry because they didn't support the ministry. They didn't believe in the ministry. Jesus did not fail society during the time that society had their opportunity that they could have grasped onto Jesus' message. It was society that failed Jesus. Jesus did not fail society. Society failed Jesus. Just like the Bible teaches that whenever you shall see Jerusalem accomplished with armies, know that the designation is nigh. When you shall see all these things going on, know that we are at the doors. When you shall see the abomination of desolation that it talks about in the book of Daniel, to know that we are at the end of civilization, the end of humanity, the end of the experiment. If there ever was an experiment, it goes back to the experiment back in Adam and Eve. Whenever God created Adam and not Steve, but God created Adam and Eve. If there was an experiment, that was the true experiment, to where all people was to get along. But whenever the devil entered into the Garden of Eden and caused them to do what they done, that was the first defiance that Satan was bringing up into humanity, to basically cause humanity to be deranged, demented, and deceived in who has really and truly brought this type of pain and suffering and destruction into humanity. And it was not God. It was not God. God knows our weaknesses. God knows where we stand towards our challenges and our things that we can deal with and the things that we can't, towards our trials and tribulations. God's not stupid. We're the ones that's stupid by thinking that He's stupid. That's the reason why God sent His Son, to let us know that yes, it can be done. You can basically live a complete, total sinless life. Because I got proof of it right here that this individual done the very thing. And if you become close enough to God, to the point that His Holy Spirit is working with you, then greater signs shall they perform in the last days, even greater signs than what Jesus had done. Jesus didn't have the internet. Jesus didn't have amplified recording studios. Jesus didn't have TV and satellites. Jesus come in the raw form during the rawness of humanity, and did not wink or blink pertaining to who He was and what He was, and was willing to sacrifice His very life so that we as a society would have an opportunity towards being saved. Not being saved necessarily physically, but being saved emotionally and spiritually. And I promise you, if I didn't have the Lord Jesus Christ on my side throughout all these years, I would not be sitting here talking to you right now, preaching to you in behind this microphone about all these occurrences that continue to keep happening, and telling people the right way to go about their lives. I am only a messenger, bringing forth a message to society. It is up to society whether or not society embraces and supports that message. For the past 30 plus years, they have not been embracing this message. If they had been embracing this message, I would have a Joe Osteen support team, a congregation that would be 25, 30, 40, 50,000 plus strong. I don't have that. But I still have my will, I still have my wits, and I still have my gumption towards getting my message out before the people. Once more, the ministry is still alive as long as the founder of the ministry is still producing. It's only whenever the ministry is dead, whenever you have cold-cocked or you have basically terminated the messenger from the ministry is whenever you can say that the ministry is dead. No, I do not look towards or forward towards my son taking over the Windmill Ministries. Simply because if he don't have enough gumption about himself to even give me a telephone call or a text message that takes just about 3.5 seconds, maybe not even that long, to say, Happy Father's Day, Dad. If he don't have enough gumption and respect towards me as him being his biological father, do you really think that he would take the reins towards holding the peace flag or holding the banner to believing in humanity for a better tomorrow? No way. No way is he going to do that. Because once more, he has been bought in like the rest of them, and it's easier now for him to wallow around in his own self-indignation, in his own self-pride, in his own self-ego, than it is for him to admit that he was wrong about his biological father. I wasn't expecting to get a telephone call or a text message yesterday, though it was Father's Day. I wasn't expecting it because my son Nicholas James Jackson has proven himself to me again and again and again towards what type of man that he is pertaining to his father. So unless there's some sort of dramatic transformation that happens in his life towards him becoming the prodigal son, I really don't look for him to become the prodigal son, much less look for him to become influential in the eyes of the Windmill Ministries. And if that's what society's waiting on, they'll probably be waiting until hell freezes over before that happens. Because I've done already seen through my son, and I know where his seeds of despair lie in his heart and within his mind. Now, I'm not saying that he don't care about me a little bit. I'm sure in his little twinkling twilight way, I'm pretty sure he'll probably tell you, oh yeah, I love my dad. Right? You love your dad, but yet now you won't even call him or send him a quick text to say, Happy Father's Day, Dad? And of course I get the same reaction regardless whether it's a major holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving. I mean, he is the one that has created this barrier between him and I to the point that he don't want to have nothing to do with me. So if he don't want to have nothing to do with me, do you think he wants to have anything to do with the ministry? Even after I'm dead and gone? No. After I'm dead and gone, the Windmill Ministries will be dead and gone with it. Because the people failed the ministry. It wasn't that the founder of the ministry failed the people. I keep telling the people that, and you keep going further and further and further away from peace and utopia and prosperity. And I don't know what it's going to take. It may take the actual non-existence of humanity to the point that God winds up raining down some sort of harsh retribution upon society, the same way that he done with Noah, to the point of ending a third of us or half of us before society's ever going to pick up and do the right thing. And if that's what it takes, if that's what's in the cards, then so be it. Which, once more, we can't blame God, because God is not going to make us serve him and be righteous for him and towards him. But what he will do is make us regret that we wasn't a supporter of God and that we didn't live our lives according to the way that God expects for us to live our lives. And that's basically what's occurring. We're all going through misery. We're all going through hell because of this resistance movement that began back in 1988 whenever 9 tapes was sent to the White House to Ronald Reagan and Mr. Bush, because of this movement has now placed us where we are right now towards being $25 trillion in debt and no hope in sight. Now, does that mean that we are at our end? No. Because the Bible's very clear in the first 4 chapters of Revelations to go back, to go back, to go back, and do thy first works over again. And if we don't go back, then it talks about the inedible. And you may be saying, well, Jubby, what is the inedible? He says very clearly that he will throw us off into a sick bed, and he will throw us off into great tribulation, except we repent and turn from our sinful and wicked, ungodly ways. That is a fact, Jack. You can't distort it. You can't pollute it. You can't interpret it, translate it in any other way other than what the first 4 chapters of Revelations discusses for it to be like. And once more, these are not Jubby's words. These are God's words coming directly out of the book of life.
Very inspiring to watch all those people stand in line for hours amid the chaos that went on in Georgia primary to actually cast their ballot. So that was pretty amazing. Civic duty. Reverend Barber, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, talking more about the power of democracy, why did the Attorney General, William Barr, fire Jeffrey Berman? He's the top prosecutor at the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office. Berman was appointed after President Trump fired his predecessor in 2017. But now his office has investigated some of the president's allies, including his lawyer, Rudolph Giuliani. So what does this latest in a string of judicial and oversight firings say?
I'm going to stop right there. Once more, the Bible says that God will get tired of humanity and he will allow for the wicked to turn upon to the wicked and basically consume each other. That's basically where we're at right now in all this stalemating that's going on. And I realize I was one of the first ones being raised up in the South. I was one of the first ones to talk about heritage, talk about culture. But I have looked through all of those lies, and I understand that the Confederate rebel flag that was put to shame pertaining to the Civil War is not a symbol of Southern heritage, but rather is a symbol of hate, and it's a symbol of rejection towards equal and fairness for all. In other words, I have evolved. I have understood. And I've always believed that the Confederate flag, the rebel flag, was a bad symbol, because occasionally I would fly it in honor towards anti-slavery, anti-unfairness, anti-battle, anti-war, I knew it was bad. And now, because of all this stuff that's coming out in regard to George Floyd's life being taken the way that it's been taken, I now understand it even more, in a more in-depth way, that yes, the Confederate flag that NASA has banned from any and all of their tracks is a symbol of hate and not a symbol of heritage. Thank you for listening. Good luck to all of us. Good luck to each and every one of us coming from the Windmill Ministries here at 291 Thompson Road. And shalom. God bless.